Hi, I'm Mark Clayton. I'd like to show you some of the research results that we've derived at SMARTreview Incorporated as we look at how to automate plan review for the BIM world. By adding a few parameters to a BIM, it becomes easy to use the BIM to visualize code compliance strategy and document a solution. A thorough and careful analysis of the IBC has led us to a method for parameterizing the building code. We've looked at chapters 5, chapters 6 and 7, construction types, interior finishes in chapter 8, fire protection systems in chapter 9, and means of egress in chapter 10 in our analysis. We have identified which elements and categories are relevant to key provisions of the code and how we think you can store them in Revit as parameters so that they're available for checking particular provisions of the code. Here's what we've found. The elements in Revit that are important to a plan review for those chapters are the walls, the roofs, the floors, the doors, the windows, the levels, the property line, the rooms, and the areas. It's not that complicated of a model. Further analysis of the building code suggests that the information about these objects is relevant to the code, but there needs to be more information about them. So we have identified what parameters to use. Some of the parameters are built in, already in Revit. Those are in regular font or regular face, while we have added additional parameters that I'm going to show in boldface. So for walls, we already have a function parameter which defines whether it's an exterior or an interior wall, a fire rating parameter, but we've added instance parameters for facing because the building code is concerned whether the wall faces open space, public way, or another structure. Fire separation distance because it's important whether an exterior wall, how far it is from a lot line, and width of public way because that also affects the provisions of the building code. Floor objects require a fire rating. So built into Revit, they don't have a fire rating, so we added a type parameter for fire ratings. For stairs, we added a type instance parameter that allows us to define it to be an interior or an exterior stair. For roofs, we added two type parameters, a covering flame spread classification and a fire rating. For doors, we added, we're making use of a function parameter, which already is in Revit, fire rating and width parameters, but we've also added instance parameters for protected and egress type. And the egress types that we've identified are not egress doorway, exit discharge doorway, or an exit doorway. For windows, we need a type parameter for fire rating, and we need an instance parameter for whether it's protected or not. For rooms, we need quite a few new instance parameters. We need a room type because the building code defines its own notion of room types. Special use, which is used in the building code to define some very individualistic and special kinds of functions. Function of space. Every room in a building needs to be defined as a function of space so that one can calculate the occupant load. The override load factor allows us to change the standard factor for calculating occupant load, which is necessary for accommodating certain building uses. An override load, which a good example of needing an override load is to simply put in the number of fixed seats in an auditorium rather than calculate the occupant load based on the area. And an area which defines which we just need to pull the area of the room out in order to calculate the occupant load of the room. We also defined area objects that allow us to establish occupancy classifications based on an area within the building. So we established an area objects or an area scheme, and then occupancy classification for areas within that scheme, and we collect them into separation groups. So an area in the building code, an area could be a separated area, a non-separated area, or an accessory area. And this allows us to collect them into separation groups that define the separated areas. If an area is within a separation group, it may be an accessory area. We also need a little bit of information about levels. We need to define a level of exit discharge. We also have to know where the grade plane is and the height of the building. For property lines, we make use of property lines, but we haven't defined any additional parameters for them. Now, we also defined for all of these elements, we're making use of several of three additional instance parameters. First, we make use of the mark value for naming instances. Every object in Revit has a mark, which allows anything to be named. Naming them makes it much easier to find them in long, exhaustive lists of elements. We have a do not use parameter, which is just a simple checkbox, which allows us to draw objects but not include them in the code analysis. For example, an overhead door, a rolling overhead door, is very common on a loading dock or in a storage area, but it's not allowed as a egress doorway. So we simply exclude it by clicking the do not use parameter. The code results allows us to generate results of our code analysis and then embed them back in the Revit model for visualization. So here's what our software, SMARTreview APR, looks like in Revit. You see that in the add-in menu, I can simply click on APR and it will run the software. Check out some of the other videos and you'll see how that works. But one of the first things it will do is, on a brand new model, is it will generate all of these parameters that are needed for our building code analysis. So you don't have to put them in. It will simply create all those parameters for you. If you're interested in SMARTreview APR, please contact me, Mark Clayton, at smartreview.biz, or Jack Thompson at smartreview.biz. You can download a free trial by creating an account, logging in, and then downloading it. For tutorials, you can check them out on YouTube.